The night the moon goddess herself would witness an Alpha King be humiliated, the entire supernatural world had turned out to watch. The entire empire had turned out to witness the Alpha King's fate be sealed. Hundreds of nobles, corporate titans, and pack alphas from across continents packed the moonlit courtyard of Valemore Castle, their designer gowns and tailored suits glittering under strings of silver lights. Commoners pressed against the iron gates, phones raised, live streaming this historic moment, the moon's bonding ceremony that would crown Cain Valen's destined mate and shift the balance of power between the human and supernatural worlds. The air hummed with anticipation, thick as the storm gathered overhead, and underneath it all, whispers. "I heard she's the journalist," a society matron murmured behind her champagne flute. "The one who exposed Senator Crow's trafficking ring." Her companion leaned closer, diamonds catching moonlight. "Rebecca Hale. She's built her career destroying powerful men." "Ironic, isn't it?" "Poor Cain," someone else sighed, their voice dripping with false sympathy. "Mated to a woman who'll never stop seeing him as a monster to expose." On the raised dais at the courtyard's far end, said Alpha King stood motionless as a predator carved from shadow and restraint. Cain Valen cut an imposing figure in ceremonial black and gold armor, broad-shouldered and tall, dark hair slightly too long, falling across sharp cheekbones that could have been sculpted from marble. His amber eyes, glowing faintly in the moonlight, scanned the crowd with the bored assessment of a man who owned everything he surveyed. His face betrayed nothing. No nervousness. No curiosity. Not even a flicker of interest in the woman fate had chosen for him. The indifference was deliberate. It had to be. Hidden among the crowd of journalists corralled behind velvet ropes, a young photographer adjusted her camera lens, her press badge catching the light. She kept her head down, blonde hair tucked beneath a baseball cap, just another face in the media circus. No one looked twice at her. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, as the sacred pool at the courtyard's center began to glow. "This is it," someone breathed nearby. The moonlight concentrated, pouring down like liquid silver until it struck the water's surface. The pool erupted in radiance, and from its depths, a figure began to rise. Silence crashed over the courtyard like a breaking wave. She emerged wreathed in light, one hand gracefully accepting the arm of a ceremonial attendant as she stepped onto the marble. She wore white silk that seemed woven from starlight itself, the gown flowing around her like water given form, embroidered with golden thread that traced ancient runes along the hem. But it was the veil that held every eye. Layer upon layer of gossamer silk, pale as moonlight, completely obscuring her face, cascading down her back like a waterfall of secrets. The woman in white reached the top of the pool steps and paused, spine straight, head high, waiting. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. On his dais, Cain Valen finally moved. He descended with predatory grace, each step deliberate, boots echoing against ancient stone as he crossed the courtyard. His expression remained carefully neutral, but his wolf's presence rippled through the air, making the humans shiver and the shifters bare their throats in instinctive submission. He knew what everyone expected. The defiant journalist who'd called him a tyrant in a tailored suit on national television. The woman who'd spent 3 years exposing the corruption of men like him. "Rebecca Hale," he said when he reached the pool's edge, his voice a low rumble that carried across the silent courtyard. "Welcome to Valemore. The moon goddess has spoken, and I am honored by her choice." The veiled woman curtsied low, graceful despite the heavy silk. Cain extended his hand, amber eyes unreadable. "May I?" A pause that felt eternal. Then the woman placed her hand in his. The crowd leaned forward as one, shameless in their curiosity. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. History was being made. By the ancient law of the moon's bonding, King continued, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that seemed almost possessive, "I am granted the honor of the unveiling of being the first to look upon my mate's face." The woman nodded, silent. He reached for her veil. The courtyard went so quiet you could hear the fountain's distant trickle, the rustle of silk, the collective held breath of hundreds. Would the infamous journalist look him in the eye? Would she flinch from the wolf she publicly called a monster? Cain lifted the gossamer layers, the silk pooling in his hands like captured moonlight. And went absolutely still. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't this. The veiled woman's face was revealed to the gasping crowd, porcelain skin that seemed to glow in the moonlight, delicate features framed by golden hair that fell in soft waves, wide green eyes fringed with dark lashes that gazed up at him with demure sweetness. Beautiful. Breathtakingly, impossibly beautiful. The kind of face that belonged on magazine covers, not behind an investigative journalist's notepad. "Gods above," someone shouted. "Look at her." A woman gasped. "That's not because she doesn't look like her photos at all." "She's stunning," another voice cried. "The Alpha King's been blessed." The crowd's mood shifted from morbid curiosity to celebration in an instant. This was better than anyone had hoped. Their king hadn't been saddled with a sharp-tongued hellion. He'd been gifted a beauty who looked like she belonged in his arms. The woman in white smiled demure, lovely, everything a queen should be. Cant smiled back, still staring at her as if trying to reconcile the face before him with the woman who'd eviscerated him on live television. Rebecca, he started, his voice rougher than before. You are. He seemed to catch himself, awareness flickering behind his eyes. Something wasn't right. But before he could voice his suspicion, the woman spoke. Her voice was soft, sweet as honey. I accept the bond, Alpha King. I am honored to be your mate. The crowd erupted in cheers. And in the back, tucked among the press corps with her camera and her borrowed credentials, Rebecca Hale watched it all unfold. She watched the Alpha King stare at the woman he thought was his destined mate. She watched the crowd celebrate a beauty they hadn't expected. She watched Cant Valen's confusion war with attraction as he tried to make sense of the sweet stranger before him. They probably wouldn't be so excited if they knew she'd sent her assistant Unia in her place, sweet, gorgeous Unia who'd agreed to play the role of a lifetime. This is the plan, Rebecca reminded herself, fighting the strange twist in her chest as Cant's hand remained clasped around the impostors. Because while the Alpha King fell for a pretty face, while the court gossiped about unexpected beauty, while everyone focused on the veiled bride and the cameras captured every angle of the perfect couple, no one would suspect that the real Rebecca Hale stood 20 feet away, posing as an unremarkable photographer in ill-fitting jeans and a borrowed press pass. And most importantly, no one would stop her from infiltrating Valemore Castle to find the evidence she needed to expose Cant Valen's empire for what it truly was, a corporate machine built on blood, exploitation, and secrets dark enough to topple kingdoms. She raised her camera and took the shot of the Alpha King and his false mate, framed in moonlight, the perfect lie. Smile for the camera, Your Majesty, she thought grimly. Because in 1 month, I'm going to burn your whole world down. The rejection letter sat on Rebecca's desk like a loaded gun. Wait before Rebecca's plan falls apart, answer me this. You've been watching for free while I've spent hours crafting this story. The least you could do is hit subscribe and drop a like, right? Comment where you're watching from. New York? London? Paris? Just 2 words. That's all I'm asking. Because if you're invested enough to see Cant discover Rebecca's deception, you're invested enough to take 3 seconds. Let's go. Subscribe. Like. Comment your location. Then let's watch this empire burn. She'd read it 17 times since it arrived that morning, each word seared into her memory. Hale Global Media bankruptcy proceedings initiated, assets frozen, foreclosure imminent. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks before her family lost everything. Rebecca stared out the window of her cramped office, the city of Valemore sprawling below like a glittering promise and a threat. Somewhere in that urban jungle of glass and steel, Cant Valen sat in his penthouse, pulling the strings that controlled every major corporation, every pack, every life. Including hers, apparently. How did this happen? Unia asked from the doorway, her voice small and frightened. Rebecca turned, her mind already racing through possibilities, connections, the intricate web of power that had somehow tightened around her family's throat. Someone wanted us vulnerable. Someone with the resources to buy out every investor, freeze every account, orchestrate a hostile takeover in under 2 months. You think it's him? The Alpha King? Rebecca's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, she exposed Valencorp's illegal mining operations on protected shifter lands. 2 months ago, Cant Valen had appeared on her show, turning her interrogation into a chess match that left her looking like a crusader and him like a misunderstood king. 1 month ago, her investors had started disappearing. I know it is, she said quietly. Unia moved closer, worry etched across her pretty features. So what do we do? How do we fight someone like him? Rebecca picked up the second letter that had arrived today, this one embossed with a silver moon seal. An invitation. No, a summons. You are cordially invited to attend the moon's bonding ceremony as the Alpha King's destined mate. The goddess has spoken. Your presence is required. She'd laughed when she first read it. Laughed until tears streamed down her face, because of course. Of course fate would choose the woman who'd made a career of exposing men like Cant Valen to be his mate. The universe had a sick sense of humor. But then she'd stopped laughing and started planning. We don't fight him, Rebecca said slowly, an idea crystallizing in her mind. We infiltrate him. We get inside Valemore Castle, and we find out exactly what he's hiding. Every corporation has skeletons. Every empire has a weakness. Unia's eyes widened. But you're supposed to be his mate. You can't just. Which is why I won't be there. Rebecca turned to her assistant, seeing the pieces fall into place. Unia, how would you like to be a queen? The plan had been perfect. For 3 glorious weeks, Rebecca had played her role flawlessly, the invisible photographer, the overlooked journalist, the ghost in Valemore Castle's corridors. She'd catalogued security rotations, mapped the private wings, identified which council members whispered dissent in shadowed alcoves. She'd even located Kane's private office, that glass tower where he conducted the real business of his empire. She'd been so close to finding the evidence she needed. And then, on a gray Tuesday morning, her world imploded. The call came at 6 a.m. Her mother's voice, usually steady as steel, cracked like breaking ice. Rebecca. Come home. Now. By the time she reached the Hale Global headquarters, a modest 10-story building in the human quarter of Valemore City, the vultures had already circled. News vans lined the street. Reporters she'd once called colleagues thrust microphones at her face, their questions sharp as knives. Miss Hale, is it true your company is bankrupt? How does it feel to be on the other side of an exposé? Where's your Alpha King now? Rebecca shoved through them, her press badge from the castle ceremony still clipped to her jacket, a bitter irony. Inside, the office that had buzzed with frantic energy for 20 years stood eerily silent. Empty desks. Dark computer screens. Abandoned coffee cups growing cold. Her mother waited in the executive suite, looking 10 years older than she had 3 weeks ago. The bankruptcy notice lay spread across the conference table like a death certificate. How? Rebecca breathed, sinking into a chair. We had investors. We had contracts. Dad built this company to last generations. They pulled out. Her mother's voice was hollow. Every single one. Within 48 hours. The banks froze our accounts, citing suspicious activity. Our advertisers cancelled. Even our staff, she gestured to the empty offices beyond the glass walls. They received better offers elsewhere. All from subsidiaries we later traced back to one parent corporation. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. Valencorp. Her mother nodded, sliding a folder across the table. Inside, a maze of shell companies, acquisitions, and hostile takeovers, all bearing Kane Valen's signature in elegant, deliberate script. He didn't just destroy us, Rebecca. He dismantled us. Piece by piece. Legally. So thoroughly that we have no recourse, no appeal. Her mother's hands trembled as she closed the folder. We have 2 weeks before foreclosure. Then we lose everything. The company. The house. Your father's legacy. The rage that flooded Rebecca's veins was molten, primal. She'd known Kane Valen was ruthless. She'd documented his corporate conquests, his carefully legal destructions of anyone who opposed him. But this was personal. This was punishment. The ceremony, Rebecca whispered. He figured it out. Her mother frowned. What? But Rebecca was already standing, her mind racing through that night 3 weeks ago. Kane's momentary hesitation when he'd unveiled Unia. The flicker of awareness in his amber eyes. The way his gaze had swept the crowd afterward, searching, suspicious. He'd known. Maybe not immediately, but soon enough. And instead of exposing her deception publicly, instead of dragging her before his counsel for the insult of sending an impostor, he'd done this. Surgical. Devastating. Utterly destroying everything she loved while keeping his hands perfectly clean. I'm going to fix this, Rebecca said, her voice deadly calm. Rebecca, no. Whatever you're thinking. But she was already gone, fury propelling her through the empty halls and out into the ruthless morning light. Valencorp Tower pierced the Valemore skyline like a blade of black glass and steel. 70 stories of unchecked power, its shadow falling across half the city. Rebecca had photographed it dozens of times during her infiltration, always from the outside, always looking up at the penthouse levels where King conducted his most private business. She'd never imagined walking through the front doors. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and money-soaring ceilings, abstract art worth more than her family's entire company, security so tight she could feel it humming in the air. Shifters in expensive suits monitored every entrance, their predator eyes tracking her the moment she stepped inside. Rebecca approached the reception desk, chin high despite her rumpled clothes and sleepless eyes. I need to see Kane Valen. The receptionist, a beautiful woman with the controlled grace of a wolf, didn't even look up. Do you have an appointment? No. Then I'm afraid. Tell him Rebecca Hale is here. She leaned forward, letting her fury show. The real one. I believe he's been expecting me. That got the woman's attention. Her eyes flicked up, widened slightly, then dropped to her computer screen. A moment later, she reached for her phone. The conversation was brief, whispered, punctuated by a glance at Rebecca that mixed pity with something like fear. "Top floor," the receptionist said finally, handing over a visitor's badge embedded with a silver chip. "The elevator will take you directly to his office." "He's waiting." Of course he was. The elevator ride took less than a minute but felt like falling. Each ascending floor ticked past corporate offices, executive suites, private floors that required special clearance until finally, the doors opened onto a space that stole the breath from her lungs. Cain's office wasn't an office. It was a fortress made of glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 walls, offering a view of Valemore City that made it look like a kingdom spread at his feet. The furniture was minimal, brutally elegant dark wood and leather, everything precisely placed. But it was the 4th wall that made her stomach drop. A massive screen displayed real-time data, stock tickers, security feeds, corporate holdings across 6 continents. And in the center of it all, backlit by the city he controlled, stood Cain Valen. He'd shed the ceremonial armor for a tailored suit that probably cost more than her car, charcoal gray that made his amber eyes glow like banked fire. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. He held a tumbler of whiskey, though it wasn't even noon, and watched her enter with the patient amusement of a wolf who'd already won. "Rebecca Hale," he said, her name a low rumble in his chest. "The real one, I'm told. I was wondering how long it would take you to come crawling." The word crawling ignited something vicious in her chest. "You destroyed my family. I dismantled a corporate entity that was harboring fraudulent activity." He took a sip of whiskey, never breaking eye contact. "Hardly personal. Fraudulent. We've been in business for 20 years. And in those 20 years, you've made quite a few enemies, haven't you?" Cain moved toward his desk with that predatory grace, setting down his glass. "Powerful men you've exposed. Corporations you've brought to their knees with your investigations. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? That you could reject an Alpha King in front of the entire world and walk away unscathed?" Rebecca's hands clenched into fists. "So this is revenge. For the ceremony. This?" Cain gestured to the screens behind him, where she could see the Hale Global logo next to a flashing acquisition pending status. "This is simply business. You made a choice 3 weeks ago, Rebecca. You chose to humiliate me, to send some pretty decoy in your place, to spit on destiny itself." His voice dropped, dangerous. "I simply ensured you'd understand the weight of that choice. By destroying everything my father built? By taking away my family's livelihood?" Her voice cracked despite her fury. "What kind of monster?" "The kind you called me on national television." He moved closer, and she hated how her body responded to his proximity, the way her pulse quickened, the way some traitorous part of her recognized his scent, pine and smoke and something wild. "You wanted a monster, Rebecca. So I became one." They stood 5 feet apart, the city sprawling behind him, the weight of his power pressing against her like a physical force. "What do you want?" she asked, hating how defeated she sounded. "To watch me beg? To hear me apologize?" Cain's smile was slow, predatory. "I want nothing from you. Unless..." He paused, amber eyes traveling over her face as if memorizing every furious line. "Unless you come to me willingly." "Never. Then your family loses everything in 2 weeks. Your mother loses her home. Your father's legacy becomes a footnote in my corporate acquisitions." He returned to his desk, dismissing her. "The choice, as always, is yours." Rebecca turned to leave, pride burning brighter than desperation, brighter than the fear clawing at her chest. She would find another way. She would expose him, burn his empire down, do whatever it took to save her family without surrendering to this arrogant, cruel. Although, Cain's voice stopped her at the elevator, "I do find it curious." She didn't turn around. "What?" "Your father's company. It holds assets beyond its media operations, doesn't it?" The rustle of paper, the click of a file opening. Property deeds. Land rights. Some dating back generations. A pause, loaded with meaning. Including a rather interesting parcel northeast of the city. Near the old-growth forest. The Celestial Grove, I believe the ancient maps call it. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. "Land that's been in your family's name for over a century," King continued, his voice silk over steel. "Land that, according to some very old, very specific laws, can only be accessed by someone of Hale blood." Another pause. "Land that I've been trying to acquire for 5 years." She turned slowly, seeing the truth written in his satisfied smile. This wasn't revenge. It was a trap. And she'd walked right into it. So you see, Cant said, leaning back in his chair like a king on his throne, I don't need you to beg, Rebecca. I don't need your apology. His eyes blazed with triumph. I just need you willing enough to sign the papers that will give me access to the one thing in this city I don't already own. The elevator doors opened behind her, waiting. Her pride screamed to walk away, to find some other solution, to never give this monster the satisfaction of her surrender. But as she stood there, trapped between her fury and her family's survival, Rebecca realized something that made her hate him even more. Cant Vallon hadn't just destroyed her world. He'd made himself her only way to save it. 2 weeks, Cant said softly. That's how long you have to decide. Come to me willingly, Rebecca. Or watch everything you love turn to ash. She stepped into the elevator, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman at war with herself. The doors closed on Cant's victorious smile, and as the elevator plummeted toward the ground, Rebecca made a promise to herself: she would give him what he wanted. And then she would destroy him for it. Rebecca spent exactly 48 hours wrestling with her pride before it finally surrendered to necessity. 48 hours of watching her mother's hope crumble a little more with each phone call to lawyers who couldn't help, investors who wouldn't return calls, banks that had already made up their minds. 48 hours of staring at her father's portrait in the now empty headquarters, remembering how he'd built Hale Global with nothing but integrity and a relentless pursuit of truth. 48 hours of hating Cant Vallon with an intensity that burned like swallowed fire. But hate, she'd learned, was just another form of fuel. On the third morning, she returned to Valancorp Tower. This time, she wore armor of her own, a tailored black suit that had cost 3 months' salary, heels that added 3 inches to her height, and the cold, calculated expression she'd perfected during years of facing down corrupt politicians and corporate criminals. If Cant Vallon wanted to play games of power, she'd speak his language. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Miss Hale. Mr. Vallon isn't expecting. He's expecting me, Rebecca interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. He's been expecting me since the moment he destroyed my family. Something flickered in the woman's eyes, respect, maybe, or pity. She reached for her phone without another word. This time, when the elevator doors opened to Cant's glass fortress, Rebecca didn't hesitate. She strode in like she owned the space, her heels clicking against marble with military precision. Cant stood at the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him as he surveyed his kingdom. He didn't turn when she entered. 2 days, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the vast room. I expected you to last at least a week. I'm not here to satisfy your expectations. No? He turned then, and the sight of him in the morning light dark suit, amber eyes sharp with intelligence and something darker made her breath catch despite herself. Then why are you here, Rebecca? She moved to his desk, pulling a manila folder from her bag and placing it on the polished surface with deliberate care. I'm here to make you an offer you can't refuse. His eyebrow arched, amused. Bold words for someone who has nothing left to bargain with. On the contrary. She opened the folder, revealing the documents she'd spent 2 sleepless nights preparing. I have exactly what you want. Access to the Celestial Grove. The land rights you've been coveting for 5 years. The one piece of Valemore you can't simply buy or intimidate into submission. Cant approached the desk slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. I'm listening. You want the Grove. I want my family's companies saved and restored to full operational status. She met his eyes, refusing to flinch from the predatory interest there. But I won't just sign over the deed like some desperate victim. You want access to that land? Then you'll have to give me something more than money. And what would that be? His voice had dropped to that dangerous rumble that made her skin prickle. Rebecca took a breath, steadying herself for the words that would change everything. Marriage. A contract. You'll become my husband in name and legal standing. In exchange, you'll save Hale Global, restore every investor, unfreeze every account, ensure my family's legacy continues exactly as my father built it. The silence that followed was deafening. Cant stared at her, his expression unreadable, and for a terrifying moment she thought he'd laugh in her face. That he'd tell her she'd overplayed her hand, that she had nothing he couldn't simply take through legal manipulation and time. But then his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Marriage. How unexpected. It's a business arrangement, she said quickly, hating the defensive note in her voice. Nothing more. A contract of survival, not affection. I'll be your wife on paper, give you access to the Grove, play whatever role you need me to play in public. But this isn't about destiny or fate or whatever the moon goddess allegedly decreed. This is about protecting what's mine. From me. Cant picked up the contract, scanning the terms she'd outlined with meticulous care. How ironic. The woman who rejected her fated mate now proposes marriage to the very monster she despises. I'm proposing a business deal to a ruthless businessman, Rebecca corrected. There's a difference. He continued reading, his expression shifting subtly as he processed each clause. She'd been thorough with terms protecting her family's company, guarantees of operational independence, strict boundaries on his involvement in Hale Global's editorial decisions. She'd even included a sunset clause. After 1 year, either party could dissolve the marriage by mutual agreement. You've thought of everything, Cant murmured, and there was something almost like approval in his voice. Every contingency, every protection. Very impressive, Rebecca. You'd make an excellent lawyer. I've exposed enough corrupt ones to know how they think. Indeed. He set down the contract, leaning against his desk with casual elegance. But you've forgotten something crucial. Her stomach tightened. What? My terms. Cant's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. You want me to save your company, grant you access to resources most people spend lifetimes acquiring, and give you the protection of the Valen name. All of that requires trust. Intimacy. The kind that can't be built through signatures and legal clauses. I'm offering you marriage. You're offering me a piece of paper. He moved closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. If we're going to do this, Rebecca, we do it my way. You want to be my wife? Then you'll live in my world. Not as a visitor, not as an enemy playing pretend. You'll live under my roof, follow my rules, and exist in my territory. For how long? The question came out steadier than she felt. 1 lunar cycle. Cant's smile was slow, deliberate. 28 days. You'll move into my penthouse, attend events at my side, allow me to understand exactly who the woman I'm binding myself to really is. No separate residences. No running back to your mother's house when things get uncomfortable. If you want my resources, my protection, my signature on your pretty contract, you'll give me 1 month of your undivided presence. Rebecca's mind raced. A month under his roof. A month subject to his rules, his proximity, his suffocating control. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to find another way, to never give this arrogant predator that kind of power over her life. But then she thought of her mother's trembling hands. Her father's legacy crumbling to dust. The employees who dedicated their lives to Hale Global, now jobless because she dared to defy an Alpha King. And after a month, she asked quietly. If I fulfill your terms? Then I signed your contract. Hale Global is restored to its full glory. Your family is protected. And you'll have your year to decide whether to honor the marriage or dissolve it. Cant extended his hand, palm up, an offering and a challenge. But you have to survive the month first. She stared at his hand strongly, scarred along the knuckles, capable of destroying everything she loved with a single phone call. This was insane. Reckless. Everything her father had taught her to avoid. But it was also the only chance she had. Rebecca placed her hand in his, hating how her pulse jumped at the contact, how her wolf not her wolf, she was human, she couldn't have that kind of reaction, recognized something in his touch that felt inevitably right. 1 month, she whispered, the words tasting like surrender and strategy in equal measure. Cant's fingers closed around hers, warm and possessive. He pulled her just slightly closer, near enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, smell the pine and smoke scent that clung to his skin. 1 month, he agreed, his voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous. That's all fate ever needs. He reached past her, picking up a pen from his desk, and signed her contract with a flourish. Then he pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, and spoke with casual authority, restore full operations to Hale Global. Unfreeze all accounts. Reinstate all employees with back pay and bonuses for their trouble. Make it priority 1. Just like that. A snap of his fingers, and her family's nightmare ended. Rebecca should have felt relief. Victory. Instead, as Cant's hand remained wrapped around hers and his smile promised complications she couldn't begin to predict, she felt only the cold certainty that she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. And he was already planning what to do with her soul. Welcome home, wife, Cant murmured, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt far too intimate for a business arrangement. I'll have your things moved to the penthouse by tonight. The city glittered behind him, beautiful and merciless, and Rebecca realized with dawning horror that she'd just traded one cage for another. The only question now was whether she'd survive long enough to find the key. The penthouse existed in a realm between earth and sky, suspended 70 floors above Valemore City like a kingdom carved from glass and shadow. Rebecca stood in the entrance on her first night, a single suitcase at her feet, and tried not to let her awe show. The space was vast open concept living that flowed seamlessly from room to room, floor to ceiling, windows wrapping around three sides to offer a view that made the city look like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Modern furniture in shades of charcoal and steel. Art that probably cost more than her childhood home. Everything is sleek, minimalist, and perfectly controlled. But underneath the pristine surface, something else hummed. Power. Raw and restrained, thrumming through the walls like a living pulse. "Your room is the second door on the left," Cant said from behind her, his voice carefully neutral. He'd maintained a professional distance since they'd left Valancourt Tower, as if the man who demanded she live in his world had been replaced by a polite stranger. "You'll have your own bathroom, workspace. Privacy when you need it." Rebecca turned to study him. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, but the tension in his shoulders remained. Like a wire pulled too tight. "And where's your room?" "At the end of the hall." His amber eyes met hers briefly before sliding away. "Far enough that you won't be disturbed." Something about the way he said disturbed made her skin prickle with unasked questions. That night, she learned what he meant. Rebecca woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Heavy, irregular, pacing. She lay in the darkness of her unfamiliar room, listening to Cant walk the length of the penthouse, living room to kitchen, kitchen to windows, windows back again. Over and over. Restless as a caged predator. It continued for an hour before silence finally fell. The next night, the pacing started earlier. Midnight this time, accompanied by the clink of glass, whiskey, probably, or something stronger. Rebecca pressed her ear to the door, hearing the rhythmic footfalls, the occasional harsh exhale that sounded almost painful. On the third night, she ventured out. The penthouse at night was a different creature entirely. Moonlight poured through the vast windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. And there, in that ethereal glow, she finally saw what she'd missed during daylight hours. Runes. Etched into the glass in patterns so subtle they were nearly invisible except when the moon struck them just right. Ancient symbols that pulsed faintly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Protection wards, she realized with a start. Not to keep others out but to keep something in. Can't sleep? She spun to find Cant standing in the kitchen doorway, shirtless, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. The moonlight carved shadows across his chest, revealing scars she hadn't expected, claw marks, old and silvered, crossing his ribs like terrible memories. "I could ask you the same thing," Rebecca said, forcing her gaze back to his face. "You pace every night. Why?" His jaw tightened. "Old habits. Habits don't leave scars like that." She gestured to his chest, to the marks that could only have come from one source. "Did you do that to yourself?" Cant's laugh was bitter. "Would you believe me if I said yes?" She studied him, the haunted shadows under his eyes, the white-knuckled grip on his glass, the way he held himself apart even in his own home. Like a man afraid of his own skin. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think I would." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition that she'd seen past the ruthless king to the man beneath. He took a long drink, draining the glass, then set it down with careful precision. "You should go back to bed, Rebecca." But she didn't. Instead, over the following nights, she began to understand the truth about Cant Vallon. The penthouse wasn't a home. It was a prison he'd built for himself. She saw it in the reinforced steel shutters that could seal every window. In this way he avoided mirrors after sunset. In how he'd disappear into his room some evenings and not emerge until dawn, the sounds of breaking furniture and muffled growls filtering through even the soundproofed walls. She saw it in the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin, this powerful Alpha King who ruled an empire but ate dinner alone, who controlled thousands of lives but couldn't control the beast beneath his own. Despite herself, despite everything he'd done to her family, Rebecca found her hate beginning to crack. The storm came on the seventh night. Thunder rolled across Valenmoor City like the drumbeat of war, lightning splitting the sky in violent bursts. Rain lashed the windows with such fury that even 70 floors up, Rebecca could hear it howling. She woke to a sound that made her blood freeze, a snarl, low and guttural and wrong. Not quite animal, not quite human. Something trapped between. Her instinct screamed to stay in her room, lock the door, pretend she'd heard nothing. But something stronger pulled her into the hallway. The sounds led her to a room she'd never entered, Cant's private gym, she realized, as she pushed open the door. Equipment lined the walls, but it was the figure in the center that stole her breath. Cant knelt on the floor, his back to her, his body caught in a transformation he was clearly fighting. His spine arched at an unnatural angle, muscles rippling beneath skin that seemed too tight. His hands no, not hands anymore, claws were wrapped around chains bolted to the floor, the steel links digging into flesh hard enough to draw blood. "Leave," he growled, his voice distorted, barely recognizable. "Now." But Rebecca couldn't move. She stood frozen, watching him war with himself, human consciousness battling animal instinct, control fraying with each crack of thunder. His claws dug deeper, blood pooling on the concrete. The chains groaned under the strain. "Cain," she whispered. "I said leave." The roar was pure wolf, echoing off the walls with enough force to make her stagger. But it wasn't rage she heard. It was fear. Fear of what he might become, what he might do, the beast he'd spent his whole life caging. And suddenly, Rebecca understood. The pacing. The scars. The prison was disguised as a penthouse. Cain Vallon wasn't a monster who enjoyed his power. He was a man terrified of losing control. She moved before thought could stop her, crossing the space between them. Cain's head snapped up, amber eyes bleeding to gold, pupils elongated. A warning snarl rumbled in his chest. "Don't," he managed, his voice shredding. "Can't control." Rebecca knelt in front of him, her heart hammering but her hands steady. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and placed her palm against his chest, right over his racing heart. The effect was immediate and impossible. Cain went rigid, his entire body locking. The snarl died in his throat. His claws, which had been flexing toward her, stilled. And then so gradually she almost missed it, the tension began to drain from his frame. His breathing slowed. The gold in his eyes faded back to amber. The claws retracted, leaving bloodied human hands in their wake. "How?" Cain stared at her hand on his chest, at the point of contact that had somehow, impossibly, calmed the storm raging inside him. "No one can when the wolf comes." "You shouldn't have to fight alone," Rebecca whispered, her thumb brushing across a scar. "No one should carry this kind of burden by themselves." For a long moment, they stayed frozen in that tableau, her kneeling before him, hand pressed to his heart, his chains slack and forgotten. The storm raged outside, but in this room, in this impossible space between human and beast, there was only quiet. And then Cain did something she never expected. A sound rumbled from deep in his chest, not a growl, but something softer. Peaceful. A purr that vibrated against her palm. His wolf, the beast that snarled at the world, that fought his control every full moon, that he'd spent years learning to fear. His wolf recognized her. Trusted her. Surrendered to her touch. Rebecca. Her name was rough, odd. Cain's hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his chest. "What are you?" "I don't know," she admitted, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath their joined hands. "But I think maybe the moon goddess knew what she was doing after all." The admission cost her. It felt like betrayal of her principles, her independence, everything she'd sworn when she rejected him. But sitting here in the wreckage of his control, seeing the vulnerability he showed no one else, Rebecca couldn't deny the truth humming between them. Whatever this bond was, fated or forged, divine or damned, it was real. And it terrified her more than any corporate takeover ever could. Cain's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that felt like falling. "Stay," he said quietly. "Just stay until the storm passes." She should have left. Should have retreated to the safety of her room, maintained the distance their contract required. Instead, Rebecca stayed kneeling before the Alpha King, her hand over his heart, while thunder rolled and lightning painted them in stark relief. And for the first time since arriving in his glass prison, she wondered if she was the captive. Or the key. The journal arrived in a package marked with her mother's handwriting, delivered to the penthouse by courier on a rain-soaked afternoon. Rebecca stared at the box for a full minute before opening it, some instinct warning her that whatever lay inside would change everything. Again. Inside, wrapped in faded silk, was a leather-bound book she'd never seen before. The cover was worn smooth with age, the pages yellowed and fragile. A note from her mother rested on top, written in shaking script. "Your father made me promise never to show you this. He wanted to protect you from the weight of it. But after everything that's happened after Cain Vallon, I think you need to understand what you really are. What our family has always been. I'm sorry I kept this from you. Mom." Rebecca carried the journal to her room, settling into the window seat that overlooked the city. The first page bore a name written in elegant, old-fashioned script, Margaret Hale, 1952. Her grandmother. Dead before Rebecca was born. She began to read. "The women of our bloodline have always known the truth, even when the men tried to bury it. We are not simply human. We are keepers. Guardians of the celestial grove, the sacred land where the first wolves learned to walk as men, where the moon goddess herself touched the earth and left her mark. The grove chooses us. We do not choose it. My mother told me that our ancestors made a covenant with the goddess centuries ago. In exchange for power, the ability to command moonlight, to calm even the most savage wolf, to draw strength from the land itself, we would guard the grove from those who would exploit it. We would ensure its magic remained balanced, neither fully wild nor fully tamed. But power always attracts predators. Rebecca's hands trembled as she turned the page, finding pressed flower silver petals that still seemed to glow faintly even decades later. The Vallon family tried to claim the grove in 1947. Cain's grandfather, Alpha King Aldrich Vallon I, led an army to our land, demanding we surrender it. He believed that controlling the grove would make him unstoppable, able to command every wolf in existence, to bend the moon's will itself. He was wrong. The grove cannot be taken. Only given. When he tried to force his way in, the land itself rose against him. Wolves who entered without a keeper's blessing went mad, attacking their own packs. The moonlight burned rather than blessed. Aldrich lost half his army before retreating, and he swore vengeance on our bloodline. My mother made me promise, never let a Vallon near the grove. Never trust them, no matter how charming they seem. They are predators, and we are prey disguised as power. The words blurred as Rebecca's vision swam. She thought of Cain, of the way her touch had calmed his wolf, of the impossible connection that hummed between them. Her bloodline is the key. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Cain hadn't wanted her because of some romantic notion of fated mates. He'd wanted her because she was the only way to access the grove. Because her blood, her touch, her very existence was the key to the power his family had coveted for generations. The marriage contract. The month in his penthouse. The way he'd orchestrated her family's destruction to force her hand. It had never been about punishment or business or even the moon goddess. It had been about the grove all along. Rebecca kept reading, devouring her grandmother's words, learning the rituals and protections, the way keepers could channel the grove's power. And there, near the end, she found the entry that made her blood turn to ice. Today I learned that Margaret Blackwood, my dear friend and fellow keeper, was found dead in her home. The authorities say it was an accident, but I know better. She'd been investigating Aldrich Vallon's business dealings, gathering evidence of corruption. 3 days later, she was gone. I fear we are not safe. Any of us. The Vallons play a long game, and they do not forgive those who stand in their way. The journal fell from Rebecca's hands. Her father. Her father had spent his career exposing corruption, following in his mother's footsteps. He'd investigated Valancorp multiple times over the years, published articles questioning their business practices, their expansion into protected territories. And then he died. A car accident, they'd said. Faulty brakes on a mountain road. Rebecca had been 17. She'd never questioned it. Until now. She found Cain in his office, the door open, city lights painting him in golden shadow. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening when he saw her before he registered what she held in her hands. Rebecca. My father. Her voice was steady, cold. Did you kill him? Cain went very still. What? She threw the journal on his desk, open to her grandmother's final entries. Did you orchestrate the accident that killed my father? Just like your grandfather killed Margaret Blackwood? Just like your family has been systematically destroying anyone who threatened your access to the grove? I don't know what you think you've found. I found the truth. Her voice cracked, fury and grief warring in her chest. My grandmother's journal. Our family history. The real reason you wanted me. Not because of some fated mate nonsense, but because my bloodline is the only key to the power your family has been trying to steal for 70 years. Cain stood slowly, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Yes, your bloodline guards the grove. Yes, my ancestors tried to claim it. But that's not. Not what? Not why you married me. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Everything you've done destroying my company, forcing me here, playing the tortured alpha who needs my calming touch, it was all manipulation. Destiny disguised as business. You used me. I saved you. Cain's voice dropped to a growl, his wolf rising in his eyes. Do you want to know why your father really died? Why was your company targeted? It was you. It was the council. His roar echoed off the windows. The shifter council who've wanted the grove's power since my grandfather's failure. They knew your father was investigating them, that he'd discovered their plans to seize the land by force. So they killed him and made it look like an accident. And when you continued his work, when you started asking the same questions, he moved toward her, desperation cracking his controlled facade. They were going to kill you too. Rebecca stepped back, shaking her head. You're lying. I'm not. King grabbed a file from his desk, thrust it at her. Look. Financial records showing the council's payments to the mechanic who sabotaged your father's car. Communications planning your assassination. I've had investigators tracking them for 5 years, Rebecca. Since I took the throne and discovered what my father and grandfather had done, what the council continued to plan. She opened the file with trembling hands. Bank transfers. Encrypted messages. Photographs of council members meeting with known criminals. And there, highlighted in yellow, her name on a hit list with a date circled in red 3 weeks after the bonding ceremony. Why would they? Her voice faltered. Because you rejected me publicly. Kane's expression was anguished. Because that rejection meant you wouldn't be under my protection. Wouldn't have the Valen name shielding you. They saw their opportunity. So you destroyed my company? The accusation was weaker now, confusion bleeding into her anger. You forced me into marriage? I orchestrated a crisis that would make you desperate enough to seek my help, yes. He didn't flinch from the admission. I bought out your investors, froze your accounts, created a situation where your only option was to come to me. Not because I wanted the Grove though, yes, that was part of it. But because it was the only way to keep you alive. Rebecca sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. You could have just told me. Warned me. Would you have believed me? The monster you'd spent years exposing on television? King crouched before her, his eyes searching hers. You would have thought it was another manipulation. Another lie. So I forced your hand. Made you hate me enough to marry me out of spite and desperation, because hate would keep you close. Safe. Was any of it real? The question came out smaller than she intended. The wolf responding to my touch? All of it. His hand covered hers, warm and steady. That was the one thing I couldn't fake, Rebecca. Couldn't plan or orchestrate. My wolf recognizes you because you are my mate. The Grove chose your bloodline to guard it centuries ago, and the moon goddess chose you to stand beside me. That's not manipulation. That's fate. She wanted to pull away, to maintain her anger, to not believe him. But the evidence sat in her lap, irrefutable and terrible. And worse, some traitorous part of her had already known. Had felt the truth of the bond between them, recognized that his desperation in the storm hadn't been an act. The council, she whispered. They're still out there. Still planning. Which is why you need to stay here. Let me protect you. Kane's thumb traced her knuckles. Marriage makes you untouchable, attacking you means attacking me, starting a war they can't win. As long as you're my wife, you're safe. And the Grove? His jaw tightened. I won't lie. I need access to it. Not to control wolves or bend moonlight, I need to understand it. My father discovered something before he died, something about the Grove's magic that the council is desperate to possess. If I can figure out what, I can stop them permanently. Rebecca stared at their joined hands, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down. Her grandmother's warnings. Kane's family's dark history. The impossible bond pulling them together despite everything. Was this revenge? She asked quietly, needing to hear him say it one more time. Any of it? No. Kane's voice was rough with honesty. It was the only way to keep you alive. And if that makes me a monster, if using your own desperation against you damns me, then I'll burn in hell gladly, as long as you survive to hate me for it. The city glittered beyond the windows, beautiful and merciless, full of enemies she'd never known existed. Rebecca thought of her father, her grandmother, all the keepers who'd died protecting a secret she'd never known she carried. She thought of Cain, this complicated predator who'd trapped her to save her, who wore his ruthlessness like armor while his wolf purred under her touch. I don't hate you, she admitted, the words tasting like surrender. I should. But I don't. Something vulnerable flickered across Kane's face. Then what do you feel? Rebecca looked at him, really looking past the Alpha King to the man who paced at night, who fought his own beast, who dismantled her world to save her life. Terrified, she whispered. Because if you're telling the truth, everything I thought I knew is a lie. And if you're lying. She swallowed hard. If you're lying, I'm falling for my own destruction. Kane lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow. Then be terrified with me. Because I've been falling since the moment you rejected me, and I still don't know if you'll be my salvation or my ruin. Outside, storm clouds gathered again, and Rebecca wondered if fate was laughing at them both. Hold up. Kane just confessed everything he destroyed to save her life. And you're just going to keep scrolling without picking a side? Drop Team Kane if he did what was necessary. Drop Team Rebecca if she should never forgive him. You've got opinions. I know you do. So comment your team, drop that like, and let's see who the pack fights for. Don't be a ghost. Pick a side. Now let's see if Rebecca can forgive the man who trapped her to protect her. The revelation about the council should have brought them together. Instead, it drove a wedge between them that grew wider with each passing day. Rebecca spent hours poring over the files Cant had given her, cross-referencing names and dates with her father's old articles. She wanted to believe him and needed to believe that the man whose touch calmed her, whose wolf recognized something essential in her soul, was telling the truth. But trust, once shattered, couldn't be rebuilt with evidence alone. Cant gave her space, though she felt his presence like a shadow. He worked late, returned to the penthouse after she'd gone to bed, left early before she woke. The only sign he'd been there at all was fresh coffee in the morning and the faint scent of pine and smoke that clung to the spaces he'd occupied. It was on the 5th day of their Cold War that everything changed. Rebecca was in Cant's office. He'd given her access to everything, all his files, all his secrets, when she found the folder marked with her father's name. Her hands shook as she opened it, expecting more evidence of council conspiracies. Instead, she found something far worse. Bank statements showing payments from her father's personal account to a group called the Preservation Society. Encrypted emails containing the shifter threat and neutralizing alpha influence. Meeting notes referencing the Celestial Grove as a weapon against supernatural tyranny. And there, in her father's own handwriting, the Grove's power must be controlled by humans, not monsters. We cannot let the Valens corrupt it further. No. The word escaped her lips like a prayer. No, he wouldn't. I'm sorry. Cant's voice came from the doorway, soft with genuine regret. I should have shown you this first. Before the council files. But I thought. My father was working with shifter hunters? Rebecca's voice cracked. He was planning to use the Grove as a weapon? Cant entered slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. He believed he was protecting humanity. The Preservation Society convinced him that shifters were an existential threat, that the Grove's power in the wrong hands could enslave the human race. He paused. They weren't entirely wrong. In the wrong hands, the Grove could do exactly that. But he allied with hunters. The people who killed her couldn't finish the sentence. People who kill indiscriminately, Cant finished quietly. Children. Elders. Anyone with wolf blood, regardless of whether they've ever hurt anyone. Your father didn't know the full extent of their methods. By the time he discovered the truth, he'd already given them too much information. Rebecca flipped through the pages, seeing the progression of her father's initial enthusiasm turning to doubt, his later emails questioning the society's tactics, his final message sent 2 days before he died. I think I've made a terrible mistake. They're not who they claim to be. I need to warn. The message ended there. Unfinished. Final. He tried to back out, she whispered. Yes. And they killed him for it. Cant moved closer, but didn't touch her. The car accident wasn't the council, Rebecca. It was the Preservation Society silencing a liability. I've had investigators tracking them for 5 years, building a case. When I learned they were targeting you, that they saw you as the key to accessing the Grove just like the council did, I had to act fast. So you destroyed my company to protect me from my father's allies? The irony was bitter on her tongue. I destroyed their access to you. Cant's voice hardened. Hale Global had been infiltrated. 3 of your board members were society plants, feeding them information about your investigations, your movements. If I hadn't forced you here, under my protection, they would have killed you and taken the Grove's location by force. Rebecca stared at the files spread across the desk, her father's misguided crusade, the society's manipulation, Cant's desperate gambit to save her. Every truth she'd built her life on was crumbling, revealing uglier truths beneath. He thought he was doing the right thing, she said softly. He thought your family were monsters. We were. Cant's admission was stark. My grandfather, my father, they were exactly what your father feared. Tyrants who saw power as a right instead of a responsibility. I spent the first 5 years of my reign undoing their damage, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that not all Valens are monsters. Something in his voice, the weight of inherited sins, the loneliness of carrying a legacy built on cruelty, made her look up. Really look at him. Not the Alpha King or the ruthless CEO, but the man who paced at night, who fought his own beast, who'd orchestrated her ruin to save her life. You're not like them, Rebecca said, surprised by how much she meant it. Cant's laugh was hollow. Tell that to the people I've crushed building my empire. The competitors I've destroyed. You're not like them, she repeated, standing. Your grandfather would have taken the grove by force. Your father would have enslaved me to access it. You married me. You gave me a contract. You're trying to protect something you could easily take. Because you make me want to be better. The confession escaped him raw and unguarded. Every time you look at me, I see myself through your eyes, the monster, the predator, the thing that destroys everything it touches. And I hate it. I hate that I had to manipulate you, force your hand, use your desperation against you. But I'd do it again, Rebecca. 1,000 times over if it meant keeping you alive. The distance between them felt both infinite and impossibly small. Rebecca's heart hammered as she processed everything, the files, the revelations, the way Cant looked at her like she was both his salvation and his damnation. My father was wrong about you, she said quietly. Was he? Cant's eyes held hers, amber depths full of centuries of violence and loneliness. I'm still a predator, Rebecca. Still a wolf wearing human skin. The fact that I want to protect you instead of consume you doesn't change what I am. No. She moved closer, drawn by something deeper than logic. But it changes everything about who you choose to be. Their arguments over the following days shifted into something more dangerous. Breakfast became confessions over coffee, Cant admitting the weight of leadership, the isolation of being feared rather than loved. Rebecca reveals her own doubts, the pressure of living up to her father's legacy while discovering it was built on lies. Proximity became temptation. Hands brushing when passing documents. The way Cant's gaze lingered on her lips when she spoke. How Rebecca found excuses to enter his office, to exist in the same space, to feel the electric pull of their bond humming between them. The blood moon rose on the 14th night of her stay, painting the penthouse in crimson light. Rebecca found Cant on the balcony, his hands gripping the railing hard enough to dent the metal. The moon's influence was stronger tonight. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the faint glow in his eyes, the way his wolf pressed against his skin. You should be inside, he said without turning. Blood moons make the wolf harder to control. Then maybe you shouldn't be alone. She stepped beside him, close enough to feel his heat. Rebecca. Her name was a warning and a plea. I'm tired of fighting this, she admitted. Whatever this is between us, fate, manipulation, destiny disguised as business, I'm tired of pretending it doesn't exist. Cant turned to face her then, and the raw hunger in his eyes stole her breath. If I touch you tonight, I won't want to stop. Good. She reached up, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Because I don't want you to. His control snapped like a severed chain. Cant pulled her against him, one hand fisting in her hair, the other spanning her waist. His kiss was desperate, claiming, full of weeks of restraint finally breaking. Rebecca melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest to his shoulders, feeling the wolf's power rippling just beneath his skin. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her inside. They made it as far as the couch before he laid her down, his body covering hers, his mouth tracing fire down her throat. Rebecca. Her name was reverent, odd. His hands mapped her curves through her clothes, trembling with the effort of remaining gentle when every instinct demanded he claim her completely. She arched into his touch, desire and destiny tangling until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. This was right. Inevitable. The bond between them singing with recognition. But then Cant froze, his body going rigid above her. I can't. The words seemed torn from his chest. God, I want to. But I can't. Rebecca's eyes flew open, confusion and hurt warring in her expression. Why? He pulled back, sitting up, his hands shaking as he ran them through his hair. The blood moon painted him in shades of crimson and shadow, beautiful and tormented. Because right now, you're here because you have to be, Cant said, his voice rough. Because of the contract, the council, the society, all the threats forcing you to stay under my protection. If I claim you tonight, you'll always wonder if it was real or just another manipulation. Cant. Not until you choose me, Rebecca. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her kiss-swollen lips. Not because you must. Not because fate demands it or circumstances force it. But because you want me, the man, not the monster, not the Alpha King with all his power and protection. Just me. Tears stung her eyes at the impossible honor in his restraint. This ruthless predator who could take whatever he wanted was giving her the one thing she'd never expected, choice. You're making it very hard to hate you, she whispered. His smile was sad, beautiful. That's the idea. Cant stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she took it, he pulled her against him one more time, pressing a kiss to her forehead that felt like a promise. When you're ready, he murmured against her skin. When you trust that this is real and not just another cage I've built around you. When you can say yes knowing you could just as easily say no. That's when I'll claim you. That's when I'll make you mine in every way that matters. He released her then, stepping back, giving her space despite the hunger still burning in his eyes. Good night, Rebecca. Try to get some sleep. He disappeared into his room, leaving her standing in the crimson moonlight, her body aching, her heart in chaos, and her mind replaying his words over and over. Not until you choose me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Rebecca wondered if she already had. The attack came 3 nights later, during the new moon when shifter power waned and human weapons held greater sway. Rebecca woke to the sound of shattering glass and screaming alarms. She bolted upright, disoriented, her heart hammering as red emergency lights flooded the penthouse. Through her window, she saw smoke rising from the lower floors of Valancourt Tower, flames licking up the sides of nearby buildings. Her door burst open. Cant stood silhouetted in the doorway, already half-dressed in tactical gear, his eyes glowing with his wolf's presence. Get dressed. Now. We have maybe 3 minutes before they reach this floor. His voice was clipped, military precise, betraying none of the fear she could see in the rigid set of his shoulders. Who? The Council. They've allied with the Preservation Society. Rogue alphas and shifter hunters working together to take you. He tossed her a bulletproof vest. They want the Grove badly enough to start a war. Rebecca's hands shook as she pulled on clothes, strapped the vest over her shirt. Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer, gunfire, howls, the distinctive crack of bones shifting. How many? Too many. Cant was at the window, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders. Fall back to the secondary positions. Protect the civilians. If any of them reach the penthouse level, you go through me first. Understood? He ended the call, turning to face her. In the red emergency lighting, he looked like something carved from violence and shadowed the Alpha King in his element, prepared to defend what was his. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. If I tell you to run, you run. His eyes bored into hers. Promise me. Cant. Promise me, Rebecca. I promise, she whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. The first rogue alpha breached the penthouse 3 minutes later, crashing through the reinforced door with supernatural strength. He was massive, his wolf barely contained beneath human skin, his eyes feral with bloodlust. Cant met him head-on. The fight was brutal, primal 2 alphas tearing into each other with claws and fangs. Cant was faster, more controlled, but the rogue fought with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. They crashed through furniture, shattered windows, their snarls echoing off the walls. Rebecca pressed herself against the far wall, watching in horror as more rogues poured through the breach. 5. 7. 10. Too many, even for an Alpha King. The woman, one of them shouted, spotting her. She's the key. 3 of them broke away from the main fight, charging toward her with inhuman speed. Rebecca ran, her training from self-defense classes utterly inadequate against supernatural predators. She made it to Cant's office before claws caught her shoulder, spinning her around. Got you, the rogue growled, his grip bruising. The Grove will be ours. Cant's roar shook the entire floor. He appeared like vengeance incarnate, his control finally snapping. The shift took him completely, not the half-transformation he'd fought in the gym, but a full manifestation of his wolf. He was enormous, easily twice the size of a normal shifter, his fur black as midnight, his eyes blazing gold with ancient power. The Alpha King's true form. The beast legends were built on. He tore through the rogues with terrifying efficiency, his jaws closing around throats, his claws rending flesh. Blood painted the pristine white walls. Bodies fell. The survivors fled, but Cant pursued, lost to the wolf's savage instinct. Fall back, someone screamed. The king's gone feral. But the rogue's retreat only drew Cant further from the penthouse, down into the tower where more enemies waited. Rebecca heard the battle intensify, gunfire, explosions, the howls of Cant's loyal wolves joining the fray. The entire building shook with the violence. She should have stayed in the office. Should have locked the door and waited for Cant to regain control. Instead, she ran toward the chaos. The stairwell was carnage. Bodies both shifter and human littered the steps. Smoke choked the air. Rebecca stumbled down flight after flight, following the sounds of destruction, until she burst onto the executive floor where Cant's council chambers stood. What she found stole the breath from her lungs. Cant, or what remained of him, stood in the center of the room, surrounded by his own wolves. They formed a defensive circle, keeping their distance, terror and loyalty warring on their faces. The beast wearing Cant's shape was nothing like the controlled predator she'd come to know. This was pure instinct, pure rage, the wolf ascendant and uncontained. Blood dripped from his muzzle. His sides heaved with each breath. And his eyes, God, his eyes held no recognition. No humanity. Just the endless hunger of a predator that had finally slipped its leash. Your Majesty, please, one of his wolves begged, hands raised in surrender. It's us. We're not the enemy. The beast snarled, taking a step forward. The wolves flinched back. He's too far gone, another whispered. We need to contain him before he kills us all. If we attack our king, we're traitors. If we don't, we're dead. Rebecca understood with dawning horror. Cain had become the very thing he'd spent his life caging. The monster his father had been. The beast that made even his own pack fear him. And she was the only one who'd ever been able to reach him. Don't. Her voice cut through the tension, steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Don't hurt him. Every head swiveled toward her. The wolves' expressions ranged from shock to pity. Clearly they thought she was signing her own death warrant. The beast's attention locked onto her. A growl rumbled from deep in his chest, primal and threatening. He took a step forward, then another, his massive form moving with predatory grace. My lady, get back, someone shouted. But Rebecca walked forward instead, her hands raised, her body trembling but her gaze never wavering from those burning gold eyes. Cain. His name was a prayer. I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. The beast snarled, closer now. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the blood and smoke clinging to his fur. One strike from those claws would end her. One snap of those jaws would tear her throat out. She kept walking. You told me once that you were a monster, Rebecca continued, her voice shaking but clear. That you were just like your father, just another predator in a crown. But you were wrong. She was within arm's reach now, close enough to touch. You're not your father's beast, Cain. You're not a monster wearing human skin. The beast's growl intensified, his lips pulling back to reveal fangs designed to kill. Rebecca reached out, her hand hovering inches from his muzzle. You're my mate. The words hung in the air like a spell. Like truth spoken into existence. The beast froze. You're my mate, she repeated, stronger now. The man who paces at night because he's afraid of hurting people. The alpha who gave me a choice when he could have taken everything. The wolf who purrs when I touch him because some part of you recognizes that we were made for this. Made for each other. She placed her palm against his muzzle, right between his eyes. The contact sparked like lightning, like moonlight made solid. Come back to me, Rebecca whispered. Please. Come back. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The beast remained frozen, caught between instinct and something deeper. And then the moon, though it was new, though it shouldn't have been visible, suddenly blazed through the shattered windows. Silver light poured into the room, concentrating around Rebecca and Cain, weaving between them like threads of destiny finally acknowledged. The beast shuddered. His form rippled, bones cracking, fur receding. The transformation reversed, pulling Cain back from the edge of permanent loss. When the light faded, he knelt before her in human form, naked and bloodied and gasping for breath. Rebecca. Her name was broken, awed. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands cupping his face, thumbs brushing away blood and tears. I've got you. You're okay. You're back. Cain's arms came around her, crushing her against his chest, his entire body shaking with the aftermath of the wolf's reign. I couldn't stop. I tried, but I couldn't. I know. It's okay. She held him tighter, feeling the bond between them pulse with new strength, new certainty. I've got you. Around them, the wolves slowly lowered their guards, relief and wonder written on their faces. Their king hadn't been lost after all. He'd been saved. By the woman he was always meant to find. Cain pulled back just enough to see her face, his eyes amber now, human and aware, searching hers with desperate intensity. You called me your mate. Yes. Rebecca's voice didn't waver. I did. You chose me. Understanding and disbelief warred in his expression. Not because you had to. Not because of contracts or threats or destiny forcing your hand. You chose me. I chose you, she confirmed, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. You asked me to wait until I was ready. Until I could say yes knowing I could say no. She smiled through her tears. I'm saying yes, Cain. I'm choosing you. All of you. The king, the wolf, the man who's too stubborn to see he's nothing like the monsters who came before him. The moon's light flared again, brighter this time, visible even in the smoke-filled room. It wrapped around them like a blessing, like a bond finally acknowledged and accepted. the fated mate bond, completing at last. Cant felt it snap into place, that final thread connecting his soul to hers, his wolf to her essence, his heart to her choice. It was overwhelming, perfect, like a missing piece of himself finally clicking home. "I love you," he breathed, the confession raw and true. "I've loved you since the moment you rejected me and proved you were stronger than fear." "I love you too," Rebecca whispered back. "You impossible, infuriating, self-sacrificing alpha." He kissed her then, there in the wreckage of battle, surrounded by his pack and painted in blood and moonlight. It was a kiss of claiming and surrender, of destiny finally embraced, of two souls too stubborn to admit they needed each other until survival demanded it. When they finally broke apart, the bond hummed between them, no longer potential but reality, sealed by choice instead of ceremony. Outside, sirens wailed. The battle wasn't over. There would be consequences, trials, a reckoning for the council's betrayal. But for this moment, kneeling in the ruins with her mate's arms around her and the moon's blessing shining down, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. The celestial grove existed in a place between legend and reality, hidden in the ancient forest northeast of Valemore City, where even satellite imagery seemed to blur and shift. Rebecca had never seen it before. Her father had kept its exact location secret even from her, but now, standing at its edge with Cant's hand in hers and an army at their backs, she understood why people were killed for it. The trees grew impossibly tall, their silver bark etched with runes that glowed faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. Moonlight seemed to pool here even when the sky held only stars, gathering in the clearing at the grove's heart where a spring bubbled up from earth that had never known human touch. The air hummed with power so ancient and pure it made her teeth ache. "This is it," Cant breathed, his wolf stirring in response to the magic saturating every inch of space. "This is what my grandfather died trying to claim. And what we'll die defending," Rebecca added grimly. Behind them, Cant's loyal wolves formed defensive positions, 50 of his best warriors, still bloodied from the tower attack but unwilling to abandon their king. They'd spent the last 12 hours tracking the rogue alphas and their Preservation Society allies here, following the trail of destruction left by those desperate enough to challenge an Alpha King on his own territory. "They're coming," Marcus, Cant's head of security, reported. His enhanced hearing picked up what the rest of them couldn't yet perceive. "At least 100. Maybe more. Shifters and hunters working together. They've got heavy weapons." Cant's jaw tightened. "Then we make our stand here. The grove doesn't fall. Not today. Not ever." "Your Majesty," one of the younger wolves protested, "we're outnumbered 2 to 1. We should fall back, call for reinforcements." "There's no time." Rebecca stepped forward, feeling the grove's magic reaching for her, recognizing the blood in her veins. "They're not here for Cant. They're here for me. For what I can unlock." She met Cant's eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. "If we run, they'll just chase us. Hunt us until they have what they want. Better to face them where the land itself can fight beside us." Cant studied her face, and she knew he was weighing his duty to protect her against his duty to protect the grove. Finally, he nodded. "Then we fight. But Rebecca stays in the center, protected at all costs. If they want her, they go through every single one of us first." "No." Rebecca's voice cut through the murmurs of agreement. "I'm not a damsel to be protected. I'm a keeper. This is my birthright, my responsibility. The grove responds to me, let me use that." "You don't know how," Cant argued, desperation bleeding into his voice. "Your grandmother's journal had rituals, but you haven't had time to practice. Then I'll learn fast." She squeezed his hand once, hard. "Trust me. The way I trusted you." Before he could respond, the attack began. They came through the trees like a nightmare made flesh of rogue alphas in full wolf form, hunters with silver bullets and blessed weapons, all of them converging on the grove with single-minded purpose. The council members who'd orchestrated this betrayal hung back, directing the assault from a distance, too cowardly to risk themselves. Cant's wolves met them head-on. The battle was chaos, claws and fangs against guns and blades, loyalty against desperation, honor against treachery. The silver trees ran red with blood. Howls of pain and fury echoed through the ancient forest. Rebecca ran to the spring at the grove's heart, her grandmother's words flooding back. The land responds to intention. Blood and will, mixed with moonlight and spoken truth. She knelt at the water's edge, cutting her palm with the knife Cant had given her. Blood dripped into the spring, and the water began to glow. "Hear me," she called, her voice rising above the battle. "I am Rebecca Hale, daughter of Margaret, granddaughter of Margaret, heir to the covenant made centuries ago. I claim my birthright. I call upon the grove's protection." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded from the spring, silver and blinding. The tree's runes blazed to life. And the earth itself began to move, roots erupting from the ground to entangle the attackers, branches reaching down to strike like whips, the very soil shifting beneath their feet. The rogue alphas who'd charged into the grove screamed as the land rejected them, as their wolves went mad with the sensation of wrongness. Hunters found their weapons turning against them, guns jamming, blades shattering. "She's activated it," someone shouted. "Get to her before she seals us out completely." A group broke through Cain's defensive line, charging toward the spring where Rebecca knelt. She raised her hands, channeling the power flowing through her, and the earth rose to meet them, a wall of roots and stone that threw them back with bone-breaking force. But there were too many. For every enemy the grove repelled, two more took their place. Cain fought at the heart of the chaos, his wolf fully manifested, moving with deadly precision. He was magnificent and terrible, the Alpha King defending his mate and his land with equal ferocity. Bodies fell in his wake. Until one of the council members, the coward that he was, raised a sniper rifle from his distant position. "Cain!" Rebecca's scream came too late. The silver bullet caught him in the chest, right above his heart. Cain stumbled, his wolf form flickering, his roar of pain cutting through every other sound. He fell to his knees, blood spreading across his fur in a dark stain. "No!" Rebecca abandoned the spring, running to him even as enemies closed in. She reached him as he shifted back to human, his hand pressed uselessly against the wound, his eyes already glazing with shock. "Rebecca," he gasped, "the grove finish it." "Not without you." She pressed her hands over his, trying to stop the bleeding, but silver poisoning was spreading through his system. She could see it in the gray pallor of his skin, the way his breathing stuttered. "Stay with me. Please, Cain, stay with me." His wolves formed a protective circle around them, holding back the onslaught, but Rebecca knew they were moments from being overwhelmed. She could save the grove or save Cain, but not both. Unless... She looked up at the moon, still visible despite the approaching dawn, and remembered her grandmother's final entry: "The covenant can be renewed, but the price is always high." "Moon goddess," Rebecca called, her voice breaking. "I know you can hear me. I know you're watching. I'll make you a deal." The battle seemed to slow, as if even the violence recognized the weight of what she was about to offer. "Spare him." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with Cain's blood on her hands. "Take me instead. Bind me to the grove forever if you must, tie my life to its balance, make me its eternal guardian, whatever you require. But let him live. Please. He's trying to be better than his bloodline. Better than the monsters who came before him. Don't let him die for it." Silence fell like a curtain. Every wolf, every hunter, every attacker frozen in place as if time itself had stopped. And then she appeared. The moon goddess manifested as light given from beautiful and terrible, ancient and ageless, radiating power that made even the Alpha King's strength look like a candle flame beside the sun. Her voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You would sacrifice your freedom for his life? Bind yourself to duty for all eternity?" "Yes." Rebecca didn't hesitate. Without question. Without regret. The goddess studied her, then Cain's dying form, then the grove still glowing with awakened power. "Is he worthy of such devotion?" "He is worthy of everything." Rebecca's voice steadied even as her heart shattered. "He's my mate. My choice. My love." The goddess smiled, sad and knowing. "Then let it be done. Your sacrifice is accepted, keeper. But know that the bond you've forged will change both your fates. The balance you maintain will be tested. And the love you fight for will be your strength and your weakness in equal measure." She raised a hand, and moonlight poured down like liquid silver. It struck Cain first, flowing into his wound, burning away the silver poisoning, knitting flesh and bone back together. He gasped, his eyes flying open, life surging back into his body with violent intensity. Then the light turned to Rebecca. The pain was exquisite, like being branded from the inside out. She felt the goddess's mark searing into her skin, just over her heart. Felt her very essence binding to the grove, her life force becoming inextricably linked to its balance. She would feel every wound it suffered, every corruption that threatened it. She would be its guardian, its voice, its sword. Forever. When the light faded, Cain was healed and whole, staring at her with horror and gratitude warring in his eyes. "What did you do?" Rebecca looked down at her chest, where a silver crescent moon now glowed against her skin, the goddess's mark, beautiful and damning. "What you would have done for me. What do mates do?" Cain pulled her into his arms, his body shaking. "You fool. You beautiful, selfless fool." Around them, the battle had ended. The rogue alphas and hunters knelt in submission, unable to fight against the goddess's presence. The council members who'd orchestrated this were already fleeing into the forest, though Rebecca knew Cant would hunt them down later. The grove is protected, the goddess's voice echoed one final time. The keeper has claimed her birthright. And the Alpha King has found his equal. Let none challenge this again. She faded, taking the frozen moment with her. Time resumed. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the grove in gold and silver. Can you feel it? Rebecca whispered, her hand pressed against the mark. The grove. It's alive. Aware. Part of me now. Cant cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. What did it cost you? Everything. She smiled despite the weight settling onto her shoulders. And nothing. I'm bound here, Cant. To this land, this magic, this balance between worlds. I can't leave it unguarded. Can't abandon my duty. The grove is part of me now. Her voice cracked. And I'm part of it. Then we build our life here, Cant said fiercely. We make the grove our home. Rule from here if we must. I don't care where we are, Rebecca, as long as we're together. She kissed him, tasting blood and tears in triumph. Together. Always. The mark on her chest pulsed in agreement, and somewhere deep in the grove's heart, the ancient trees sighed with contentment. Their keeper had come home at last. The first week after the battle, Cant barely left her side. He watched her with an intensity that bordered on desperate, cataloging every wince when the grove felt pain, every distant look when its ancient consciousness pulled at her awareness, every moment she pressed her hand to the glowing mark and whispered reassurances to land that now lived inside her soul. They'd made camp in a cottage at the grove's edge, a small structure her grandmother had built decades ago. It was simple, rustic, nothing like the glass penthouse that had been their cage and sanctuary. But it sat within the grove's protective embrace, and that was all that mattered now. Rebecca couldn't leave. Not for long. The bond pulled at her if she ventured too far, a physical ache that intensified with distance until she had no choice but to return. She was tethered here as surely as if the goddess had chained her to the ancient trees. And Cant refused to let her face that prison alone. You're staring again, Rebecca said without opening her eyes. She lay in their bed barely more than a mattress on a wooden frame with morning sunlight painting patterns across her skin. The mark on her chest glowed faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. I'm allowed to stare at my wife. Cant sat beside her, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. But there was nothing idle about the guilt in his eyes. Your mate, she corrected, finally looking at him. We never actually got married. Just made a contract and then nearly died before we could make it legal. We can fix that. His attempt at lightness fell flat. Though finding an officiant willing to come here might be challenging. Rebecca caught his hand, stilling its restless movement. Talk to me. You've been holding something back for days. Cant's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd deflect, change the subject, retreat behind the Alpha King's controlled facade. But then his composure cracked, and the words spilled out raw and anguished. You gave up your freedom for me. Cant. Don't. He pulled away, standing, pacing the small room like a caged wolf. Don't tell me it was worth it or that you'd do it again. Don't make it easier for me to accept what you sacrificed. Rebecca sat up, the blanket pooling around her waist. What would you have had me do? Let you die? Yes. The word exploded from him. God, yes. I've lived 35 years, Rebecca. Built an empire, made my mistakes, earned my scars. But your voice broke. You're 28. You had your whole life ahead of you. Freedom to go anywhere, be anything. And now you're bound here, tied to this place forever because I was too weak to dodge a bullet. You took that bullet defending me, she countered, her own anger rising. Defending the grove. Defending everything we've fought for. And you paid the price for my failure. No. Rebecca stood, crossing to him, forcing him to meet her eyes. I made a choice. The same way you made choices to protect me, destroying my company, forcing me into marriage, orchestrating my whole life because you saw threats I didn't. You made those calls because you loved me. Well, I love you too, you impossible man. And if loving you means I'm bound to this grove, to this purpose, she pressed her hand over the mark, feeling the grove's approval thrumming through her. Then I made a deal I couldn't refuse. Cant stared at her, emotions warring across his face of love and guilt and desperate hope. You really mean that? With everything I am. She took his hand, placing it over her mark. Immediately, his wolf settled, recognizing the rightness of the bond. This isn't a cage, Cant. It's for a purpose. My grandmother spent her life wishing she could protect the grove more fully. My father tried to control it out of fear. But me? She smiled. I get to guard something pure. Something worth protecting. And I get to do it with my mate beside me. That's not a sacrifice. That's a gift. His forehead dropped to hers, his breath shuddering. I don't deserve you. Good thing fate doesn't care what you think you deserve. He laughed despite himself, the sound wet with unshed tears. How are you this strong? I learned from an Alpha King who paces at night, fights his own beast, and thinks he's a monster even though he's the most honorable man I've ever known. She kissed him softly. You taught me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you build from the pieces. Cant pulled her close, crushing her against his chest, and for a long moment they simply held each other, two souls who'd fought destiny before finally surrendering to it. So what do we build? He murmured against her hair. You're bound here. My empire is in Valemore City. The council's in shambles, the preservation society's scattered. We have a chance to remake everything, but I won't do it without you beside me. Rebecca pulled back, her mind already spinning with possibilities. Then we bring Valemore here. Not physically but on purpose. We merge human innovation with shifter legacy. Build something new. A kingdom with the grove at its heart, Cant said slowly, understanding dawning. Protected land that proves humans and shifters can coexist. Can create instead of destroy. Exactly. Excitement crept into her voice. We rebuilt Hale Global here to make it a media company that tells true stories about both worlds. We establish Valencorp offices that employ humans and shifters equally. We create a model that the rest of the world can't ignore. Cant's eyes lit with that predatory intelligence she'd learned to love. And anyone who wants to challenge us has to go through the Grove's Keeper first. Now you're getting it. She grinned. I might be bound here, but that doesn't make me powerless. It makes me the strongest piece on the board. Over the following months, they did exactly that. The Grove became the beating heart of a new Valemore, one that existed both in the city and in the ancient forest. Cant split his time between the two, managing the corporation's transformation while ensuring Rebecca was never alone for long. Unia took over day-to-day operations of Hale Global, now headquartered in a beautiful building they constructed at the Grove's edge. Marcus commanded security that protected both the land and the people who came to work there. Slowly, carefully, they built something unprecedented, a place where humans studied shifter culture without fear, where wolves learned human innovation without losing their nature, where the two worlds that had warred for centuries finally found common ground. Rebecca's mother visited often, finally understanding the legacy she'd been born into. The remaining loyal council members swore fealty to their Alpha King and his Keeper Queen. Even some of the rogues who'd attacked them returned, seeking redemption and finding it in honest work protecting what they'd once tried to destroy. And through it all, the bond between Rebecca and Cant deepened, no longer fated mates forced together by destiny, but partners who chose each other every single day. 6 months after the battle, they finally made it official. The wedding took place under the Grove's ancient archway, where moonlight pooled even in daylight and the trees themselves seemed to bow in blessing. Cant wore ceremonial black and gold, not armor this time, but a suit that honored both tradition and the future they were building. Rebecca wore white silk embroidered with silver runes, her mark glowing softly against her skin, her veil made from gossamer that caught the light like captured stars. Their pack surrounded them. Unia stood as maid of honor, crying happy tears. Marcus gripped Cant's shoulder in silent support. Rebecca's mother watched with pride and wonder. And when they spoke, their vows, not contracts or deals or desperate bargains, but promises freely given, the Grove itself seemed to sing. I, Cant Valen, take you, Rebecca Hale, as my mate and my equal, Cant said, his voice rough with emotion. I vow to stand beside you, not above you. To honor your strength, not cage it. To love you not because fate demands it, but because choosing you is the easiest decision I've ever made. Rebecca's tears fell freely as she replied, I, Rebecca Hale, take you, Cant Valen, as my mate and my partner. I vow to see you truly not the monster you fear, but the man you are. To guard your heart as fiercely as I guard this grove. To love you not because I must, but because refusing you would be refusing my own soul. They exchanged rings, simple bands etched with runes that matched those on the grove's trees. And when the officiant pronounced them married, when Cant finally kissed her as his wife and not just his mate, the moonlight blazed bright enough to rival the sun. That night, they stood together under the grove's glowing archway, hand in hand, watching the stars emerge. Do you have any regrets? Cant asked quietly. About the deal you made? The freedom you gave up? Rebecca thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd rejected him publicly, who'd seen him as nothing but a monster in a tailored suit, who'd been so certain she knew what she wanted. That girl felt like a lifetime ago. No, she said honestly. That deal brought me here. To you. To a purpose bigger than exposing corruption or chasing headlines. I'm the keeper of the celestial grove, the mate of an Alpha King, the guardian of peace between two worlds. She squeezed his hand. I made a deal I couldn't refuse, Cain. And I'd make it again in a heartbeat. He pulled her close, tucking her against his side, his chin resting on her head. Around them, the grove hummed with contentment, its magic recognizing the rightness of their bond. Fate may have bound us, Rebecca, Cain whispered, his words carrying on the wind like a vow renewed. But love is what sets us free. She smiled against his chest, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. They'd started as enemies forced together by circumstance and destiny. They'd fought each other, manipulated and challenged and nearly destroyed one another in the process. But in the end, they'd chosen love over pride, partnership over power, and together over everything else. The moon rose higher, painting them in silver and shadow. The Alpha King and his keeper queen. The beast and the woman who'd tamed him. Two souls too stubborn to accept fate until they'd rewritten it on their own terms. And in the heart of the celestial grove, where magic and moonlight pooled like liquid starlight, their story became legend proof that even the most broken bonds could birth empires, and that love chosen freely was the strongest power of all. Rebecca Hale had once rejected an Alpha King before the entire world. Now she stood beside him, his equal and his match, bound not by deals or destiny alone, but by a love that had transformed them both into something neither could have become alone.